The next one, though, you would have to leave your house, even though it may be a little too controversial. I had someone ask me because obviously we covered this movie back when we saw it. Remind me, you saw the premiere,
Sundance
from what I remember. Yeah,
2023.
I saw it afterwards. My bit's been, we saw this before Jonathan Majors became domestically known, and before he was in Creed and Quantum Mania and all that stuff.
Hmm.
This man did put up great performances in what I would say is Creed 3, Last Black Man in San Francisco,
So
The
good.
Five Bloods. And I had a comment, someone saying, like, oh, no, 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 no. He recorded these movies before the incident. You're good. As if, like, the performance is going to change.
Right,
You don't
right.
got to watch a bit. Like, lying about your neighbor who you don't like, that their grass isn't green, is not how you live in this world at all. What's interesting about this movie that you do not need to support is the idea that this is a film that almost embodies, you see it right there in this frame in particular, the uncomfortable nature of what ironically people think Jonathan Majors is. A person who
Yeah,
can't,
yeah.
right? It's the weirdest movie to greenlight. And I think the only person beating him is what's her name? Blake Lively, with what we're going to see in A Simple Favor. But you
Hmm.
know what I'm talking about here. It's crazy to want this to be your next movie.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is a movie that in a lot of ways is sort of like a look at masculinity and this like desire to be seen in a certain
Mm,
way, because Jonathan Majors' character plays an aspiring bodybuilder, but he's also a person who is not really very successful. And he finds that despite putting in the work and sculpting his body and sacrificing all these elements of his life, that he's not seeing the benefits from it that he feels like he's been owed by society. So it is a bit of an outsider movie. It has elements of
oh, you're
Taxi
right.
Driver to
Yeah.
it, has elements of Whiplash to it. It has elements of Eminem's Stand to it, weirdly enough.
Good
Um,
pull.
yeah, and I think there's interesting ideas there. I think ultimately the movie is a little bit sloppy in landing all those ideas. Like it maybe has a little bit too much on its mind, and
Hmm.
it sort of ends four different times because they're
Yeah.
they're trying to maybe have their cake and eat it too a little bit here.
Hmm.
The thing is that like Jonathan Majors is incredibly compelling in the performance, and we only saw this film back then. So it may be a completely different experience now, knowing that he has this guilty verdict for domestic violence. It puts the performance in a completely new light, and one that I'm
Completely.
sure is pretty uncomfortable, given the places that this movie goes, though it might be a film that feels more 4D because of it too.
Yeah. I think it just truly showcases something about Jonathan Majors because one of the other movies he had done previous to that was Devotion, with
Mm.
also had Glenn Powell that blew up, and they were on that rise, right? This was another movie where when I saw this one at a Q&A in Chicago, he really talked about the scenes that he films. He's pulling stuff from his past, like personal
Hmm.
life. And in Devotion, there's a bit where he says all the insults that have been said to him as the military guy, they were the insults he's been told on set.
Hmm.
So for Magazine Dreams, like, what are we doing here, you know? And there's part of it that I find fascinating. I mean, you and I cover art, films. We know directors, filmmakers, all these different people who come in and make these projects what they are. Sometimes they get more meta. Sometimes they come from filmmakers like Elijah Bynum, who was about to get a big push from this film. He is the writer
Hmm.
and the director. He had previously done a movie with a little guy named Timothy Chalamet right before he blew up.
Timothée.
Blew up without him.
Yeah.
And this blew up in his face, bro. I,
Mm.
I do think the script is very smart. I think it becomes, like you were saying, messy. I think it becomes even more uncomfortable when you have to see the movie without the baggage that comes with it. And now even
Hmm.
more so, how is that avoidable?
Right.
I'm curious to see how this does, not in theaters, but when it comes back home, because that's probably when you're going to see people tap into it. And it is an interesting story. I want to give a shout out to Haley Bennett, who's in the movie as well. She plays a
Hmm.
very interesting character as the one is his store clerk, who he kind of has a crush on. You have Taylor Page, who just
Hmm.
cuts to the point. I wanted more of her in the movie,
Yeah.
but I still think it's a really strong performance from Jonathan Majors. It's all said and done. Magazine
Yeah.
Dreams.
Yeah. Definitely a compelling movie. Um, I'm sure with certain people it'll resonate. Shout out Ricky, who reached out to us to say that he saw it, and almost everybody in his theater was crying. It's a rough movie at times,
It
but
is a rough movie. Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
What'd you go
you
in
know,
at?
I think I got to double check. I think I went 3 stars on it.
The ending, you were either giving the ending the benefit of what it could be, or like you said, it ends way too many times. And
Yeah.
now with what's happened, I don't think the movie will have that. Like, no one's gonna give it the benefit. But you never
No.
know. Sometimes, Johnny Depp stuff. People come in, they don't even care for the guy, but they want to root for something, which is another
Right.
story. Magazine Dreams, hot in theaters. If you're interested, give it a watch.